Welcome. Let's talk about something we all think we understand: deadlines. In the legal world, we call them statutes of limitation. The idea is simple, right? A clock starts ticking, and when it runs out, your chance for justice is gone. But what if I told you that in Indian law, there are situations where that clock, well, it never even starts to tick? Let's dive into the surprising truth about legal deadlines.
So here's the big question. Does every single legal right come with an expiry date? Your gut reaction is probably, of course. I mean, you can't just sue someone for something that happened half a century ago, can you? Well, as we're about to see, the law has some pretty mind-bending exceptions that completely challenge that common-sense idea of time and justice.
So, in legal speak, this deadline is called the limitation period. It's basically the maximum amount of time you have to take legal action after something happens. The whole point is to keep things fair, to stop people from living under the threat of a lawsuit forever, and to make sure cases are argued while evidence is still, fresh. Once that time is up, the door to the courthouse for that specific issue slams shut. That's the general rule. But today, we're all about the exceptions.
And our first exception is a huge one. It's about those special situations where trust is so central, so foundational, that the law itself says time just can't break it. Let me tell you a quick story to show you exactly what I mean.
All right, picture this. A sister, a widow, gives a significant amount of money to her brother. She's crystal clear about it. She says, "This is for my children. I'm trusting you to use this money for their education." Now, this isn't just her handing him some cash. She has legally created a trust for a very specific purpose, and her brother has just become the trustee.
So the trust is set up way back in 1990. For the next 3+ decades, the brother does spend a little here and there on school fees, the basics. But secretly, he's been siphoning off a huge chunk of that money for himself. Flash forward to 2025. The children are now grown up, and they stumble upon the truth. They realize their uncle totally betrayed their mother's trust.
But here's the massive problem. 35 years have passed. In almost any other kind of financial dispute, the legal window would have closed decades ago. So the question is it just too late? Have the children lost their chance to get back what was rightfully theirs?
And the answer, which is pretty incredible, is no. It is absolutely not too late. In this very specific kind of case, the limitation period is infinite. There is no deadline. He can be sued at any time for breaking that trust. So why on earth is there no deadline? The magic is in Section 10 of India's Limitation Act. It basically says there is no time limit for suing a trustee who is given property for a specific purpose. Because the sister explicitly said the money was for education, that purpose was specific and clear. And that's what triggers this powerful rule. The law sees the duty of a trustee as sacred. Breaking that kind of specific trust is considered such a fundamental wrong that time can't be a shield. And this protection is so strong, it doesn't just apply to the original trustee, but to their heirs too. It also covers the managers of religious endowments. The main takeaway here is simple. When a specific trust is broken, the law makes sure that justice never ever expires.
Okay, from trusts that defy time, let's jump to our next puzzle. What happens when a legal fight crosses international borders? Whose deadline do you have to follow?
Now, the guiding principle here has a pretty fancy Latin name, lex fori. But all it really means is the law of the forum. In plain English, it just means that whichever court you bring your case to will apply its own local rules.
So, for example, let's say you sign a contract in Uganda, but something goes wrong, and you decide to sue in a court in India. That Indian court isn't going to start digging into Ugandan law to figure out the deadline. Nope, it's going to apply its own law, the Indian Limitation Act. The forum, the place where you sue, is what sets the clock. But of course, there's always a twist. One very interesting exception.
An Indian court might actually apply a foreign deadline, but only if that foreign law does something very specific and very powerful. See, most limitation laws just bar the remedy. They just shut the courthouse door. But some foreign laws go a step further. They completely extinguish the underlying right itself. It's like the law doesn't just lock the door, it burns the contract to ashes. If a foreign law does that, and if both people involved lived in that foreign country for that whole deadline period, then an Indian court will say, well, that right doesn't even exist anymore, and the case will be thrown out.
Okay, so far we've seen legal time limits bend and even vanish. But now we're going to flip this whole idea on its head. We're moving into the truly mind-bending world of what's called the law of prescription. This is where the steady passage of time doesn't just end rights, it can actually create brand new ones, right out of thin air.
So let's be super clear about the difference here because it's crucial. The law of limitation, what we've mostly been talking about, just bars the remedy. The court's door is shut, but deep down your original right technically still exists. The law of prescription, though, whoa, that's on another level. It's so much more powerful. It completely wipes out the original owner's right and can actually create a new legally solid right for someone else. Let's see how that's even possible.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this works. This is all about how using someone else's property for a really long time without being stopped can actually transform from what looks like trespassing into a legally protected right. We call this an easement. Basically, the right to use someone's land for a specific, limited reason.
Here's the playbook. Imagine a villager has been using a shortcut across their neighbor's land to reach a main road. They do this every single day for 20 straight years. Now, they do it peacefully, they do it openly for everyone to see, and this is key. They never once asked for permission. After those 20 years are up, they can actually go to court. And if the court agrees that all the conditions were met, that simple shortcut becomes a permanent, legally enforceable easementary right. They now have the legal right to use that path forever.
But the law is incredibly strict about this. To get this right, all 4 of these golden rules must be met for the full 20 years. The use has to be peaceful, no fighting your way through. It has to be open, or as the great Hindi phrase kulam kula puts it, totally out in the open, not sneaking around at night. It must be without interruption, which means the owner didn't manage to block you for a year or more. And finally, this is the real kicker, it has to be non-permissive. The second the owner says, sure, you can use my path, the clock stops. Why? Because now you have permission, a license, and you're no longer building up a legal right.
And this is absolutely crucial to remember. Just because you hit the 20-year mark doesn't mean the right is magically yours. It's not automatic. Hitting 20 years just gives you the ticket to go to court and ask for the right. You have to file a suit and get a formal declaration from a judge. Without that court order, it's just a habit you've had for a long time, not a legal right.
And there's one last little wrinkle here. If the land you're trying to establish this right on belongs to the government, the bar is set even higher. The period of continuous use you need to prove isn't 20 years, it's 30.
So, let's take a step back. What does all of this really mean? We've seen legal clocks that never start, clocks that change at international borders, and clocks that can literally create rights from nothing. It's time to pull all these surprising ideas together. So here are the big takeaways. First, for specific trusts, justice has no expiration date. Second, for contracts made overseas, it's almost always the local court's deadline that matters. And finally, the simple act of using someone's property for long enough can actually forge a brand new, permanent legal right. It's clear that in the eyes of the law, time is so much more than just a ticking clock.
And that leaves us with one last, really fascinating question to think about. If the simple, quiet passage of time can create a brand new right for one person while taking it away from another, what does that really say about the nature of ownership itself? It suggests that rights aren't just about what's written on a piece of paper, but also about what's established through consistent, long-term practice. It shows that ownership isn't always absolute. It can be shaped by the steady, quiet pressure of time. Thanks for joining me.